May the 4th be with you. Happy Star Wars Day, everybody. Thanks for coming to see the show today. We've been doing a Star Wars streaming marathon today through the Gray Order, folks, and I'm happy to kind of debut my stream today. I've been at this for just a short while. I've got a few videos up, and at this point, I've been doing a lot of videos with a magic maker on reimagining Star Wars. So it's nice to be back here on my channel on Star Wars Day. It's been a big day today, and we've got a lot to share. So I look forward to getting into that. Of course, we'll start with the Clone Wars episode that started this morning. Most people have been talking about that all day, and rightfully so. It's a fantastic episode, a great arc, and a lot of fun to talk about. And then we'll talk a little bit about the Mandalorian documentary short segment that came out today. That'll be fun. And then some big Star Wars news came out. So I see some folks on here. Thank you so much for stopping by. Brian Hill, Stories by Irish. Thanks so much. Lunga, the Great Council, thank you for coming. And Wu-Tang Wells. So it's good to see you guys. Thanks so much. And without any further ado, I thought I'd get into the Clone Wars episode from today. And I took a bunch of screenshots, first of all, just to show Second Street Marvel that you can do it, and we had a thing about that. So if Trinity makes it on here, we can show him how to do screenshots. And then secondly, just because I think it backs up a lot of the story, so I'm going to take off my webcam here, and I'll share some screenshots from today. And the first one here starts with Maul. So this episode picked up right off of episode 11. We get right into 12 here with Victory and Death. And in 11, there was this fantastic scene where Maul was going down the hallway scene. There's a lot of talk about it being on par with the Vader hallway scene, and I pretty much agree with that. Maul's hallway scene from episode 11, Shattered, was awesome and a bit frightening, right? So his death count's pretty high, and it carries on into this episode as he carries through the hallway and he goes into the hyperdrive room, and this whole time he's using the Force to deflect blaster bolts, to turn shots away and other folks. And then he gets into the hyperdrive room, and he uses the Force to pull down the hyperdrives. And in doing so, he takes out a few more clone troopers, and it brings, of course, it brings the ship out of hyperspace, and it's smoking. It's not doing well, and it's caught up in the gravity pull, and the clones, in an effort to keep Maul and Ahsoka and Rex, for that matter, from escaping, had destroyed the escape pods. We're down to only a couple of ships left on, or smaller ships left to escape on, and they're pretty much trapped. And it becomes a good point, because pretty soon we find out that they're willing to risk everything. Their main focus is on executing Ahsoka, carrying out Order 66, and that they're willing to sacrifice for it. And that's their only focus. And Rex as much as says so to Ahsoka. And I've got a couple more shots here too that kind of back that up. So there's this one shuttle, and that's what Ahsoka and Rex are trying to get to. And you can see all the clone troopers are assembled there to prevent them from getting there. And that's when Rex and Ahsoka have their talk. It was a very emotional scene. We get a chance to see Ahsoka go up to Rex and take his helmet off. He sheds a tear, and he's very split here between his brothers that are in the the clone troopers that are out to kill him. He doesn't want to kill them, but he sees it's the only choice in his devotion to Ahsoka, and he's being ripped apart. And here we get to see Ahsoka connect with Rex by taking his helmet off, and they exchange this very special scene. And from there we end up with them coming up with this plan where Ahsoka is going to give herself up. It's sort of the Chewbacca being held in shackles thing, where he's being gone as a prisoner, as a ruse to buy time to set their escape plan in place. So that's what happens. Ahsoka's setting the escape plan in place. They've got the droids going to create a diversion, and then they're going to leverage that to get onto the ship and escape. And so Rex has this conversation, and it's a really good conversation, because here he brings up a salient point, one that has come up in the discussion before. Ahsoka is no longer part of the Jedi Order. And if Order 66 is to kill the Jedi, which we've heard them chant, right? He must kill the Jedi. When Fives had that chip implant go wrong, and they removed it, and then that whole arc. If Order 66 is to kill the Jedi, Ahsoka's not a Jedi. Why couldn't she be exempt from Order 66? And that's what Rex tries to use here with Jesse, and say, hey, she's not a Jedi. She hasn't been a Jedi for some time now, and we shouldn't be doing this. We need to be careful, or we'll be guilty ourselves. And of course, Jesse will have none of it. And I wanted to bring this shot up because if you've been following Ahsoka, when we first joined, she's just this scrawny little girl, like 12, 13 years old. And I noticed today, look at those biceps. She's grown. She's more mature. Her actions are more mature. Her facial structure, everything you see about her is more mature. She's stronger, obviously stronger. She's stronger in the Force. Here she's stronger physically as well. Mentally, physically, emotionally, she's grown as a character. We've been able to enjoy following her character along. It's why she connects with so many of us so strongly, because she is such a strong character that grew from being a small, kind of headstrong, arrogant little kid, right, to being a very mature, strong young woman who is a leader. And I just love that scene. I said, whoa, what happened to Ahsoka's small little scrawny arms? And so she's grown up. And then from there, Maul actually takes advantage of the diversion that the droids create, and takes the shuttle. And we see Ahsoka reach out with the Force, much like Rey did in Rise of Skywalker, to try to hold the ship and pull it back. And she's doing a good job of it. Here Rex grabs her arm to help give her some more leverage, but then they have to decide. She has to decide specifically, let the shuttle go and try to figure another way, or defend Rex. And we got to keep in mind, this whole time, this ship is caught in the gravity well of the planet. They're going in, and it's most people, it's a life-threatening situation. And here they're letting the ship go. That means that it's sort of like losing your parachute. You got one parachute and two people that need it, right? One person's got it. So in this case, there's one shuttle. Maul gets it, and then she has to let it go, which means they got to figure out another way off of the ship. And a battle ensues. I noticed this the first time. I had to go back and watch it again because something seemed odd. Ahsoka cuts this hole in the floor for them to drop through, and I thought, oh, how does she do that without cutting Rex's legs off, right? Because she spins around in a circle, and so I had to go back and I had to capture it. She actually throws the sabers out, catches them with the Force as they penetrate into the floor, and then using the Force, she then does that circle, and she cuts the hole in the floor. I was like, aha, okay. So once you slow it down and you look at it, you can see exactly what happened there. So they cut through the floor, and in that process, then they find a Y-wing, and the Y-wing, she uses the Force, pushes Rex over to the Y-wing. He pilots it out. She ends up free falling, and there's this free fall kind of scene where she ends up then getting back on the ship and running and jumping. She eventually gets in the Y-wing with Rex, and they go off to just in the nick of time to get off to safety. And oh, thanks, Fanjecture. Yeah, I thought that I thought that circle scene was pretty awesome too. Thanks for noticing. And then so they land, and you see the ship go into the planet, or it goes beneath the clouds, presumably into the planet, and you know everybody on board is going to be killed, or nearly everybody. And the whole purpose, from the time that Rex and Ahsoka left the medical bay all the way through to leaving the ship, they were trying to save lives. Ahsoka mentioned to Rex, like, we don't want to kill them, and they set the Rex's gun to stun, and they're trying to not kill his brothers, the clones, even though they're brainwashed, and they're willing to die on this ship to execute Ahsoka and Rex and Maul. They're willing to die to execute them. That's their singular focus. But Ahsoka wants to save them. She cares about them. She still has a desire to see them rescued. But ultimately, they all die, and we see Rex coming back to the Y-wing with the shovel, where they've just buried all of these clones. And it's a stunning scene, because if you think about it, just a couple hours earlier, these clones had painted their masks in a devotion to Ahsoka, to take on her markings and to show their loyalty to her, even though she was no longer part of the Jedi Order. She was no longer a commander or a general. They still saluted her. They still showed her that respect. And now they gave their lives trying to kill her. And here, Ahsoka and Rex took time to retrieve their remains and to bury them. It's a very somber scene. The music through the whole thing, through both of these episodes, is very heavy. It's somber. There's really great choral pieces that overlap. The music is worth going back and listening to if you didn't catch it the first time through. Really, really good. And then we transition. There's this great scene where we're focused in on Ahsoka's face, and as her image is fading away, you see Vader's shuttle coming in, and there's this overlap where Vader's shuttle's overlapped with Ahsoka's face there for a minute, as one's fading out and one's fading in. The cinematography is another point, and this has been brought up before by others, but the animation in this arc, the detail, just the emotion that's in their eyes when you look at the eye movements, you look at the stop motion or the motion capture that they did in the duels. All of the animation in this arc is breathtaking, is wonderful. It's I can't wait for them to stitch these fours together into a movie. We can anticipate it. It feels like something they're going to do, and it feels like the quality is strong enough for them to release this like on a 4K, which I would love to see 4K at home and have that as part of my collection. I sincerely hope that we're getting that, and I hope that when we saw that little snippet last week of the motion capture from episode 10, that we'll get a side piece for the movie about the making of. And we'll get to see the motion capture. We'll get to see the storytelling. We'll get to see the story arcs as Filoni's going through this process to come up with this just tremendous story. Just really, really tremendous. And then we go from that scene to Vader coming up to the cemetery, if you will, where all those helmets were. Well, some time has passed. It's snow covered. When Ahsoka was there, Ahsoka and Rex, we saw before, there wasn't the snow coverage, and they get here, the snow's there, and Ahsoka and Vader goes up, and he can sense Ahsoka's blade on the ground, reaches and dusts it off and picks it up, and when he does that, there's another scene right after that where he looks up and you see this owl floating around. And if you think about what a magician that has, or a wizard or a witch that has their the animal that goes with them, their spirit animal, or that's with them. This has become associated with Ahsoka, and Vader looks up and sees this owl circling, and then it goes up to the owl's perspective looking down, or it goes actually above the owl looking down, and you see Vader from on top. And at that point we see Vader with the saber that he restored for Ahsoka. This is, again, a very powerful emotional moment, and we see into his eyepieces, and I thought it was interesting there. His eyepieces are kind of red. You've got the blue of the saber, the white background. Just the color here is wonderful, and you see the blue saber. He's contemplating, and I had the feeling, the first time I thought, well, okay, he doesn't know she's alive. He's assuming she's dead, and he's reached down and lit that saber, and he's here verifying that Ahsoka died in this wreckage. But when I rewatched it, I had more of the sense that when he picked that saber up, he was reaching out with the Force to see if Ahsoka was present in the Force. And I think now, after rewatching it, that Vader, or Anakin, knows that Ahsoka is there. And I've had a couple of conversations today about this, like when Anakin woke up from being in the suit for the first time, his very first thoughts go to Padme, and of course, at that point, Palpatine says that he's killed her. No, right? There's the big scene, and with that, then he crushes everything in the room. Right? That's a big emotional moment for Anakin. And we had a discussion earlier with a magic maker who may join us here in a little bit. But I had a discussion earlier with a magic maker on his channel where we talked about Vader's roots, the things that are grounding him, the things that are grounding Anakin, his personal connections were Padme and at this point Ahsoka. Those were the two people he trusted most. Of course, there was also Obi-Wan, but that friction had been building for some time, and Padme and Ahsoka were the last ones. And of course, learning that Padme was dead, then he goes and searches out Ahsoka. That's what's happening here. We've got Anakin going to look for his Padawan. He's looking for the person he trusts most, and he finds Ahsoka's blade, and I think he reached out with the Force and verified that she's still alive. Some people think that he thinks she's dead. I'm curious. We asked this earlier. I'm curious. What are your thoughts? Do you think that Anakin thinks she's alive, or that he thinks she's dead? And do you think that Anakin's still there, or is this just pure Vader and he's out searching down the last of the Jedi? The fascinating thing with all of this is different viewers bring into the picture different perspectives. We all watch the show with our own background and the things that attract us. And I find it fascinating to get into conversations with folks and see the different perspectives. So I'd be curious to know, do you think that Anakin is there at all? Or do you think it's just Vader? There's this discussion, does Vader replace Anakin? And if Anakin is there, does he think that Ahsoka's alive, or has he at this point think that she's died? And I'm seeing your comments come in. This is good. So first of all, we get Lunga. He says, I think he knows, but considering he knows she is no longer a Jedi, he uses that as an excuse not to hunt her down. I completely agree with you, Lunga. I absolutely agree with you. And Fanjector, I see you agree as well that he thinks she's alive. That's great. I'd be curious, anybody else come in? If you're watching this on a replay, put it in the comments. I'll be happy to come back later and interact with you, and just curious to see your perspectives. So we get to the end of the show, and there's this great scene. Again, if we get Trinity to come along with his outdated technology and his limited computer skills, you can screen capture Trinity. I did it here. So here you go. You see the helmet with Ahsoka's print on it, and you see Vader walking away in the reflection. Fantastic, wonderful closing scene. We get the end of the Clone Wars, right? The Clone Wars are over, and this is the end. This is the end. Anakin's walking away. He's got Ahsoka's blue lightsaber, and this is a great image where we get Ahsoka's print on that helmet and Vader. Just wonderful, absolutely wonderful. To Star Wars Network. Hey, welcome. Good to see you here. Good to see you. Yeah, the Trinity Smackdown. It's Trinity Smackdown all day today. I didn't know if you guys knew that, but Star Wars Day is also Trinity Smackdown Day. So please don't hesitate to give him a hard time, and that's what the day is for. So with that being said, there was another thing released today, and it was the documentary series, docu-series behind the making of The Mandalorian. And I thought this was absolutely wonderful. I've watched it twice this morning. It was great. And there were a couple things. Josh from the Gen of Nerds mentioned it earlier, and I agree with him largely that we see here Favreau in a very leadership role. He's definitely the guy in charge of this project. He and Filoni, you watch this docuseries, you see that lessons that Lucasfilm has had. And I know a lot of people like to call it Disney. This is Disney era Star Wars. Well, that's absolutely true. It's Disney era Star Wars. But we have to remember Lucasfilm is the one in charge of the story group, right? Lucasfilm is creating these. They're under Disney, but this is still Lucasfilm projects. So for here, Kathleen Kennedy's the president of Lucasfilm, and she's gotten a lot of criticism, and I think some of it is rightfully earned. Her job as president, I think she's had some missteps, and those are, in my opinion, undeniable. But she's also had some very good successes. Even when you look at The Rise of Skywalker, and I think the disappointing box office that it had, it still cracked $1 billion. And it may be a while before we see another movie crack $1 billion with what we've experienced this year with the social distancing and being quarantined, and a lot of movies getting pushed. I think that it's unlikely that we will get $1 billion movie this year. It's possible we might sneak one in at the end of the year, But it kind of depends on if this virus comes back up and has a resurgence, and if they start locking down things again and maybe limiting the seats in a box office, right? In a theater, if the seats are limited, then they can't sell as many tickets. I think we're likely to be some time before we see another billion-dollar movie. So even though The Rise of Skywalker fell way short of what I even expected, it's I think all byproduct of the fandom as a whole. And when we get fantastic projects like the Clone Wars and the Mandalorian, these are just wonderful, wonderful. And Filoni here, it was neat during this docuseries. If you haven't watched it, please, it's worth a watch, or two or three. It's fantastic. And you see where the individual directors were together through this. You see, like when Filoni's directing, or when Taika Waititi's directing, you see the other directors around, and you can see as the directors taking their artistic license. They were given some freedom. Some were involved in some writing. Some were involved in different decisions that were made. But there was a moment in the docuseries where they mentioned that Filoni is really the guy keeping everything within the rails. And they were given a lot of freedom, but at the same time, if they wanted to do something that was inconsistent or outside the story arc as a whole, Filoni was there to bring them in. And I thought that this was very likely the result of some lessons learned within Lucasfilm. And most of the criticisms with the sequel trilogy still reside around this continuity. Did we have continuity between The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker? A lot of people feel those stories were disjointed, and that the changing of gears. I look at it this way: like if you're driving a manual transmission, right, and you're shifting gears, you push the clutch and you shift the gear, that those were not real smooth shifts, and that we get a little bit of a lurch in there, a lunge, as we go from one to the other as they're shifting gears. And I think that's a fair criticism. And what you see here in this docuseries was just wonderful. You see Favreau and Filoni clearly directing like the story, and then the directors were given challenges. It was great to hear Favreau talking about the challenges that come up and how the directors would go off the playbook. He said, you can't just direct from the playbook. If you do that, you're going to fail. And so there was this story that they're trying to tell, but along the way, things happened. It took them off the playbook. And even with that, they had these rails that, and they mentioned it like Filoni was there keeping the train on the tracks, right? So I think that imagery works very, very well. And here, when you've got very creative, artistic people, and I thought that was really brought out in this docuseries. Each one of these directors comes from a very different background. Each one of them has a lot of different artistic qualities and creativity. They come from diverse backgrounds, right? And regardless of diversity of gender, race, all of that, they come from very diverse backgrounds, and how they got to where they are. They came at this from different places, and they bring different things to the plate. And it was fun to watch this. Like I said, if you haven't seen it, this docuseries is fantastic. And I agree with Fanjector. I can't wait for the next episode. And it's got me excited to go back and watch The Mandalorian again. I thought that this would go episodically, episode by episode. But what we see here is this episode focused on the directors, their backgrounds, how they got here, and kind of their different styles and what they're brought to the table. It was really good. And what I'm hoping when we see come out of this is a a direction for Star Wars. And we saw it with the announcement on Project Luminous, where they brought all these writers in and they had these brainstorming sessions. They came up with this overarching storyline, right? And each of them are going to write their stories, and each of them are authors, and they're going to write them differently. Some are writing in different platforms. So you've got comics and novels, you've got young adult and children's. You've got all these different mediums that are being released through that project. And when you get that kind of coordinated effort, then what we see in The Mandalorian, even though we've got different directors bringing their own visions in, their own style and backgrounds, artistic flair, the story itself continued on because we had this real tight leadership through Favreau and Filoni. And it's my opinion and my hope, and I mentioned it this morning on the Den of Nerds stream. Josh had mentioned that it would be fantastic to see Favreau be announced as the next president of Lucasfilm, and he and Filoni make Filoni perhaps the lead of story of the story group, and overseeing again keeping that train on the rails. Right, Filoni has proven that he can do that and that he can direct, but just his knowledge. And when you saw these other directors talk about the value that Dave was there, right? He could answer things. He's honoring what George Lucas had. And we've got a magic maker joining us here. I'm going to add him to the call. Oh, hello, magic maker. Welcome to the live stream.
Hello, Santa.
Hey, it's good to have you here.
Awesome.
I was just talking about the docuseries. We did a live stream, or we did a recording earlier today for your channel, and you hadn't yet had the chance to see the docuseries. Have you caught up with that yet?
I haven't got to see the whole thing. I started it and then I got interrupted, so I wasn't able to finish it.
Okay. What'd you get to see, and what do you think so far?
I'm loving it. I'm loving the interaction with Filoni and just getting his and Favreau and getting their take. And I think you're absolutely right with what we talked about with a certain person in the background.
Yeah, well, that was just getting to that. So let me catch the folks here on the live stream on this. So we had talked about perhaps Favreau being named the next president, and I want to bring up another image that I took from the show, and it's all the directors together and Kathleen Kennedy, and through the docu-series, through this episode, you could see Kathleen involved in different parts at different times. She's in several scenes throughout the episode, but there's a couple things, and Josh mentioned it this morning. We talked about it on a Magic Maker's channel on Reimagining Star Wars. She doesn't speak a word. She's not in the room. She's not part of the discussion, and in this episode anyway, she has nothing to do with telling the story of the making of The Mandalorian. Of course, we know she's the president of Lucasfilm. We know that she's running things. But some of the rumors that said she was kicked off the set, she wasn't allowed to be there, those are clearly false. She was definitely on set. You see pictures of her from different times on set there. And here you see her involved in the picture as they took that as well. So, yeah, so what a Magic Maker just said. She is absent from this episode for sure. And it is very clear that Favreau was running things. So go ahead.
Yeah, but I mean, like we talked about before, I mean, I think that if there's a fault of Kathleen Kennedy, it's actually not that she's involved. It's that she's actually not involved enough in the beginning. And so, I mean, I know a lot of people will make it angry about certain things, whether it's politics or whether it's I think that all the issues we've had with Star Wars are not necessarily ideological. I think that a lot of the problems with with what we have with Star Wars is actually a lack of an executive producer being involved in the pre-production process. So if you're in the pre-production process, that's when you get to rein a director or a writer in and say, wait a minute, that's not the scope of the story we're trying to tell. And like we talked about with a director, you don't say you can tell whatever story you want. You get to say you can tell the story how you want, but this is the story. And I think if there's a fault of Kathleen Kennedy, it's not, that she was overly involved, it's that she's been under involved, and she's had to correct things on the backside. That's just my take.
Oh, I agree. She has a responsibility as president that has to do with making sure you've got the right people in the right place. And as we were just talking about, a lot of the missteps that were taken through the sequel trilogy that at least are perceived, that disjointed story that came between The Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker, that seemed to be, for many people, a very disjointed story. And some people loved The Last Jedi, some people hated it. Some people loved The Rise of Skywalker, some people hated it. And what we find out is that the story as a whole can be criticized because didn't seem to be what we see in this series or in this episode, where you see Favreau and Filoni making sure that story is being told in a cohesive way, right?
Right. I mean, so like we've talked about this. I mean, where continuity is highly important, and it's not just continuity between a trilogy or in a story. It's continuity of an overarching story. So I mean, and I know people get angry about lore. They may get angry about a character not being the same as they were, or a change occurring that they don't get to follow. The truth is that what vision that allows you to keep some continuity, because you have continuity of thought, whether it's continuity of complete detail. And that's what you get out of Filoni and Favreau working together. So even if the details haven't been completely worked out, unless you do have people whose job that is to keep their details together, but you got to have some continuity of thought as well.
Very good, very good. And I mentioned that these directors have their own background. They come in with artistic flair and their own visions. These are very creative, intelligent people who are fantastic at directing movies, and they all come from different backgrounds, from art and animation and TV and everything. So when you bring them all together to do one story, it's important that you have somebody that has that train on the rails. I think that was a very good example.
Yeah, I think that keeping the train on the rails is exactly. It doesn't matter who's conducting the train, as long as the train is staying on the same track.
That's right.
If we're derailing the train, then we're in trouble.
That's exactly right. And I think a lot of people felt like that it sort of happened between the episodes of the sequel trilogy, and I would agree with the people who are critical that say, well, they should have done this for the sequels. Why didn't they do this for those when they did it for The Mandalorian? And I would say that it's them learning on the job. Right? When George Lucas stepped away from Lucasfilm, the folks left in charge of Lucasfilm didn't have that really clearly established. How do you do this without George Lucas? And I think they're figuring it out. And it's clear that Filoni is stepping into that in a very effective way.
I mean, of course, has his vision, and they have to want under that vision. And I think some of the ideas that people forgot about it came from Filoni. I mean, because it also matters how you execute something. I mean, an idea can be a bad or a good idea if it's executed properly or poorly. So, I mean, so a good idea executed poorly is not necessarily a good idea,
Yeah.
But a bad idea executed properly might appear to be a good idea because it's just executed so well.
Yeah. Well, my daughter posted in the chat, and I think she's absolutely right here. And it goes with what you're saying. She said, you're never going to please everyone. If you're trying to please everyone, you're quickly going to stray away from the main goal. And I think that's one of the main criticisms of The Rise of Skywalker, is that they tried to please everyone. And then by doing so, they didn't tell the best story that they could have told.
I tend to agree with that. I mean, I think they were trying to smooth things over. And I think that you have to have a grasp of what is generally accepted within your audience.
Yeah.
And so there is going to be some consensus. May not be consensus on 100% of it, but there should be a consensus of about 65 to 70% of it, I would think, on what is good. And so if you can kind of focus on that portion of it, then you're going to please the majority of your audience. I mean, majority of the audience was pleased with The Force Awakens. I mean, and we were willing to see how the story played.
Yeah, I agree.
Off the story.
And just to catch some folks up that may be joining us here that aren't familiar with your channel, I got to know a Magic Maker within Thor Skywalker's Discord group. So for about almost a year, I was a supporter of Thor Skywalker on his Discord and his channel, and as one of the few in his group that was a big supporter of The Last Jedi. If those that know Thor are familiar with his channel know that he is very critical of the Last Jedi, and he's grown to be more critical of The Rise of Skywalker even. And I was drawn to Thor because I was looking for how other Star Wars fans saw things so much differently than I did. And a Magic Maker and I, we've been collaborating on a channel for a couple months now, and as we've been leading up through 2 and through season 7 of the Clone Wars, and a Magic Maker is more of a critic of the Last Jedi, not a huge supporter of it by any means, and I am a huge supporter of the Last Jedi. We see things from a different perspective, and his channel, Reimagining Star Wars, they're about storytelling, and they're about trying to create a universe that is consistent. And there's a series of like laws that lead to a consistent story. And so that's a big focus that he brings to the table, and that's something that is a strength of his, and that he helps people with their fan fictions and through writing and in storytelling, even if you want to go back and look at the movies to see these inconsistencies. So I've enjoyed collaborating with him, and that's really where he's coming from here when we're talking about this. And he's talking about when you're telling a story, how you do that. So I appreciate that other perspective and expertise he brings to the table. So thank you.
I mean, more like guidelines. I think if you have laws, it's too rigid. But the idea is to have a basic process by which you're going to keep the continuity of thought. I mean, I think that you want to keep it as consistent as possible. And good storytelling does that. And there's always going to be some variation to the left and right. It just can't be, outright disrespectful.
True. Yeah, and I've heard all kinds of different anecdotes that are or illustrations of that kind of consistency. Like if you establish a certain law of gravity on a planet, then all of a sudden the gravity changes without any explanation, and people are just flying around, or they're crushed under the weight of the gravity. You never explain it. It's going to confuse people, and you've got to kind of adhere to that universe that you're establishing when you're trying to tell these stories.
Yeah, and that's important. I mean, and so as that we tell why we're reimagining Star Wars is because we're telling fan fiction, and some of those reimaginings are the stories that already came out, right?
Yeah.
So and some of them are our own stories, but they're in that universe. And you're reimagining what that universe would be under these different conditions. So that's why we're reimagining Star Wars. It's not that we're wanting to undo everything that's come before us.
And that's an important distinction. You're not trying to say, the Phantom Menace is trash and we're throwing it out. It doesn't belong in the saga. You're not doing that
Right.
at all. You're saying, okay, the Phantom Menace had some issues, and here's how it could have been told differently, and accomplished this more in a consistent way with the story as a whole.
Right, and so we talk about that, and there may be a fan fiction that does it. Maybe it's my fan fiction, maybe it's someone else's fan fiction.
Right.
Like we just put out a recent video where with an alternate universe or a fan fiction that's set in the time of the Force Awakens, and so it wasn't my story, but I want to support other fan fiction stories, so we put theirs out and put it out in the audio comment. It helps that they have a story that's going along simultaneous with the Force Awakens, for example. So the idea of whether it's a Force Awakens, whether it's a Clone Wars, whether it's a fan fiction idea, is that we have a universe that we're trying to enrich, not scare away.
Perfect. We're coming up on a quarter till. I want to go to the news of the day with Star Wars Day. I'm happy to see that Lucasfilm as a whole has embraced Star Wars Day, and they're making a point to do some special things for fans of the fandom on Star Wars Day. I noticed that I've got all kinds of emails today about different promotions, things that are on sale. I did see that there's a story that you can download for free from. Let me see which one it is. You can download the ebook Queen's Shadow by E.K. Johnston. So this is an opportunity. If you've not gotten into any of the novels or the recent novels, you can get this electronic version of the novel for free today. Download it. Yeah, so I've listened to it in an audiobook. It's a decent story. And for free, it's definitely worth the price. Whether you like it or dislike it, it'd be a great opportunity. I liked it. You get a little, yeah, it's free, and it's good. So I've seen that, and I'm glad to see they're embracing it. But also today they announced some news that Taika Waititi has been selected to co-write, and he's to direct a feature film, a theatrical release of Star Wars. We don't yet have a date. We don't have a subject. We don't have anything like that. But it was announced today that he's going to do that, and he's co-writing with Krysty Wilson-Cairns. And that's not a name that just rings a bell with me. And so I had to look it up. I went ahead and picked up a news article about her off of IMDb. And just to share with folks, she wrote 1917. She was involved with the writing the screenplay for 1917, which has been nominated for many awards. It's an award-winning movie. So it's exciting to see that somebody who is fresh and hot from a movie producing standpoint, from a writing standpoint, between Waititi and here Krysty, that collaboration between the two of them, I have high hopes that it'll be a fantastic Star Wars movie. And I think it leads to a thing that was discussed previously, that perhaps Star Wars is moving away from doing saga, big epic trilogies that add together, more into an MCU style, where you have writer-directors that come up with stories, and they tell the stories that build towards a larger event. So like we saw the Iron Man movies, and we saw Thor movies, and we saw Black Panther and all these movies added together into the Avengers, and then into ultimately concluding with Endgame. Right, it all built to that great big event. And what I see are the kind of indications that maybe that's what we're seeing for the future of Star Wars. We're going to see Waititi and Wilson Cairns co-write a movie, and that we've also seen other people kind of bantered around here and there. And I think that's, at least in my opinion, I think that's probably where the future of Star Wars is headed.
Yeah. Do you think Feige's going to produce this one? Do you think this will be the Feige produced?
I don't know who's producing it. It didn't mention that in what I read. If anybody here has read about it, and you know who's the producer on it, or the executive producer, if we know Feige or Filoni or Favreau's involved, I don't know. It just says that Taika Waititi's to direct and co-write. So I'm not sure who the producer is. Yeah, I don't know.
I just know we got that word that Feige was going to produce the Star Wars.
Right, we heard that as well. And they also mentioned that the Disney Plus series that was announced, and so it's a little more official here as well. It's going to be the female-centric. Variety released this thing a couple weeks ago, and it raised all kinds of furor over what a female-centric show would be. Again, I'm pumping the brakes. It's just my style, is to say, let's wait and see what it is before we get too up in arms about things. But
yeah, I'm not worried about it. I mean, it's like, okay, I mean, let's just go down the worst rabbit hole that it could be. I mean, let's just say that, I mean, everybody's fine because it's, found out because it's going to be woke or whatever, right?
Right.
Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that it is woke. And, so don't watch it.
Right.
Why?
Resistance. Resistance was an animated series that had 2 seasons. A lot of people didn't watch it. Right. So
if you don't like it, don't watch it.
Don't watch it. Right. I happened to watch Resistance. I thought it was okay. But I can understand why a lot of people didn't. And that would be the case here.
Right.
Who knows? You might get a Jessica Jones, right? Like, we talked about this a little bit, and I chatted with it with the Den of Nerds with Josh. Jessica Jones could be called a female-centric show. Now, I don't think it's gonna be TV MA by any sense, right? I don't expect Lucasfilm to go into that category, but you end up with a hero, Jessica Jones, her sister, her lawyer friend who is a lesbian and has relationships. That's certainly a female-centric show, and it certainly brought in some progressive politics and political thoughts. We see those kind of things in Jessica Jones. But Jessica Jones was also a very well written and produced show, and it was entertaining.
I mean, as long as we get a good story, right? I mean, we don't. Yeah. I mean, do you really care if the character is a female, or if the character is black, if the character is a lesbian, character is gay, as long as it's a good story?
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly. And we mentioned earlier, I don't want to get my hopes up too high, but it's very possible that a female-centric Disney Plus show could feature the live-action Ahsoka and Sabine Wren. And that's very possible.
That might be what we're getting. I mean, that would be female-centric, right?
Exactly. And most people would be excited for it as long as it's well written. And if we end up with Favreau and Filoni in that kind of role, then my confidence goes way up. It goes way, way up.
Yeah. I think the key is that we get good Star Wars. I mean, if Leslie Headland gives us a good Star Wars, all this fervor will go away. They'll be like, wow, she's an incredible director. I can't believe how good this Star Wars is. And if it's bad Star Wars, we'll say, like, oh, that was a mistake.
Yeah, exactly. It's for me, I can't agree with you more about, like, if you like it, then watch it. If you don't like it, don't watch it. And if as we have opportunities here for more Star Wars content going forward in Disney Plus, and they find a way to bring the production costs down and the quality up, if we get something the quality of The Mandalorian and the kind of budget that they brought into that. And we know they've already started with season 3. They're already working on season 3 scripts and writing that. That's fantastic news. And wherever the state of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series is, we have hopes for that. We have hopes here for perhaps an Ahsoka and Sabine Wren. And if all of those are that kind of quality, then the future is very bright. I'm excited. There was another discussion today, and I'll go ahead as we're getting towards the end here, and I'll throw it out to you. If for the next animated series, so we're wrapping up with the Clone Wars just ended. There's talk of some Rebels additional episodes of that being brought in, or another season of that, or a bit of a perhaps even a one-off kind of spin-off even. It's been characterized differently. But once we get past that, for an animated series that could step into where Clone Wars was, what would you want to see?
I'd like to see a Luke Skywalker series explaining would give us the run up to where he's doing stuff. I'd like to see Vaughn return. I'd like to see their version of Heir to the Empire.
Wonderful. I'm with you 100%. After the show this morning, I'm also interested in perhaps seeing a Vader animated series that would gap from the Revenge of the Sith to A New Hope. And I know that that's been done in comic book series runs. I know there's all kinds of stories in there, but the comic book audience is a much smaller group. The comic book runs are much smaller. And if Disney Plus is growing and it has this bigger audience, I would love to see a Vader animated series that fills that hole as well. So I'm with you.
Right.
Primarily, I would love to see Luke Skywalker, or in the legacy characters. So Luke, Han, Leia, Chewie, right? The legacy characters following Return of the Jedi, leading up to The Force Awakens. I think that's a big hole.
Yeah, I think we need to see that. I think we need to see that transition.
Yeah.
I just think we need some. I don't want to get rid of The Last Jedi. I mean, it's done. A lot of people want to get rid of it, and it's done. But the key is just getting some context. I mean, it's. I mean, people didn't like the prequel either, and then the Clone Wars came along, and then now we filled in all the spots, and we got context, and we love these characters, and now we can go back and watch the prequels and go, wow, I understand it now. I have more perspective.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the fandom needs it as much as anybody else, and I would love to see it. It's something that it could do for our sequel detractors what the Clone Wars did for prequel detractors. Sir Nerd a Lot says, I still want a Finn and Rey animated series. Hey, I'm with you, Nerd a Lot. Absolutely. I think there's a lot of story to be told following the Rise of Skywalker, where Finn and Rey are going out, and you see their relationship, where it goes, and now we know Finn is Force sensitive, and where that story might go. I'm with you, but I think a higher priority would be this time between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. So we're coming right up on 6 o'clock Eastern, 5 Central. I wanted to go back to the schedule. We have the stream marathon through the Gray Order today, and my show's coming to an end here. There's a gap in time from in the next hour, so it's a good time to catch some dinner or take a break. And at 6 p.m. Central, 7 Eastern, Rebel Scum podcast is going to be on. to carry on the stream marathon. I've got a link for it in the description here. So if you're looking for that, I've linked the Rebel Scum podcast site here, and hope to see you guys there. And then I know Josh also has a community stream this evening for the Den of Nerds. It's a fantastic May the 4th. Magic Maker, thank you so much for joining in on my show this evening.
My pleasure.
We always enjoy talking, and for those of you that haven't followed Reimagining Star Wars, I'm a collaborator with him on that channel, and we would appreciate you come find us there and subscribe and check out our content. We do come at this from different perspectives. We have fantastic discussions. We love Star Wars. We absolutely love Star Wars.
That's the key. The key is building the fandom, not tearing the fandom down.
That's absolutely right.
It's not a matter of what you like and what you don't like. It's whether we can find consensus in something. Absolutely.
And so please find us there. Thank you for being here. Happy May the 4th, everybody. And this is Star Wars Santa. I'll say, Merry Christmas, and may the Force be with you. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.